Homily 78, Part 2, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, by St. John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 78, Part 2, Matthew 25:34 through 26:5. But while the brutes have from nature their unfruitfulness and fruitfulness, these have it from choice, wherefore some are punished, and the others crowned. And he doth not punish them until he hath pleaded with them. Wherefore also, when he hath put them in their place, he mentions the charges against them. And they speak with meekness, but they have no advantage from it now, and very reasonably, because they passed by a work so much to be desired. For indeed the prophets are everywhere saying this, I will have mercy and not sacrifice. And the lawgiver by all means urged them to this, both by words and by works, and nature herself taught it. But mark them, how they are destitute not of one or two things only, but of all. For not only did they fail to feed the hungry, or clothe the naked, but not even did they visit the sick, which was an easier thing. And mark how easy are his injunctions. He said not, I was in prison, and ye set me free. I was sick, and ye raised me up again, but ye visited me, and ye came unto me. And neither in hunger is the thing commanded grievous. For no costly table did he seek, but what is needful only, and his necessary food, and he sought in a suppliant's garb, so that all things were enough to bring punishment on them. The easiness of the request, for it was bread, the pitiable character of him that requesteth, for he was poor, the sympathy of nature, for he was a man, the desirableness of the promise, for he promised a kingdom, the fearfulness of the punishment, for he threatened hell, the dignity of the one receiving, for it was God, who was receiving by the poor, the surpassing nature of the honor, that he vouchsafed to condescend so far, his just claim for what they bestowed, for of his own was he receiving. But against all these things covetousness once for all blinded them that were seized by it, and this though so great a threat was set against it. For further back also he saith, that they who receive not such as these shall suffer more grievous things than Sodom. And here he saith, Inasmuch as ye did it not unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye did it not unto me. What sayest thou? Are they thy brethren? And how dost thou call them least? Why, for this reason they are brethren, because they are lowly, because they are poor, because they are outcast. For such doth he most invite to brotherhood, the unknown, the contemptible, not meaning by these the monks only, and them that have occupied the mountains, but every believer. Though he be a secular person, yet if he be hungry and famishing, and naked, and a stranger, his will is he should have the benefit of all this care. For baptism renders a man a brother, and the partaking of the divine mysteries. Then, in order that thou mayest see in another way also the justice of the sentence, he first praises them that have done right, and saith, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you before the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat, and all that follows. For that they may not say, We had it not, he condemns them by their fellow servants, like as the virgins by the virgins, and the servant that was drunken and gluttonous by the faithful servant, and him that buried his talent by them that brought the two, and each one of them that continued in sin by them that have done right. And this comparison is sometimes made in the case of an equal, as here, and in the instance of the virgins, sometimes of him that hath advantage, as when he said, The men of Nineveh shall rise up, and shall condemn this generation, because they believed at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. And the queen of the south shall condemn this generation, because she came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And of an equal again, they shall be your judges, and again of one at advantage. Know ye not that we shall judge angels, how much more things that pertain to this life? And here, however, it is of an equal, for he compares rich with rich, and poor with poor. And not in this way only doth he show the sentence justly passed, by their fellow servants having done what was right when in the same circumstances, but also by their not being obedient so much as in these things in which poverty was no hindrance, as, for instance, in giving drink to the thirsty, in looking upon him that is in bonds, in visiting the sick. And when he had commended them that had done right, he shows how great was originally his bond of love towards them. For come, saith he, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. To how many good things is this same equivalent? To be blessed, and blessed of the Father. And wherefore were they counted worthy of such great honours? What is the cause? I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink, and what follows. Of what honour, of what blessedness are these words? And he said not, take, but inherit, as one's own, as your father's, as yours, as due to you from the first. For before you were, saith he, these things had been prepared, and made ready for you, forasmuch as I knew you would be such as you are. And in return for what do they receive such things? For the covering of a roof, for a garment, for bread, for cold water, for visiting, for going into the prison. For indeed in every case it is for what is needed, and sometimes not even for that. For surely, as I have said, the sick and he that is in bonds seeks not for this only, but the one to be loosed, the other to be delivered from his infirmity. But he, being gracious, requires only what is within our power, or rather even less than what is within our power, leaving to us to exert our generosity in doing more. But to the others he saith, Depart from me, ye cursed, no longer of the Father, for not he laid the curse upon them, but their own works, into the everlasting fire, prepared, not for you, but for the devil and his angels. For concerning the kingdom indeed, when he had said, Come, inherit the kingdom, he added, prepared for you before the foundation of the world. But concerning the fire, no longer so, but prepared for the devil. I, saith he, prepared the kingdom for you, but the fire no more for you, but for the devil and his angels. But since ye cast yourselves therein, impute it to yourselves. And not in this way only, but by what follows also, like as though he were excusing himself to them, he sets forth the causes. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me no meat. For though he that came to thee had been thine enemy, were not his sufferings enough to have overcome and subdued even the merciless? Hunger and cold and bonds and nakedness and sickness, and to wander everywhere houseless. These things are sufficient even to destroy enmity. But ye did not these things even to a friend, being at once friend and benefactor and Lord. Though it be a dog we see hungry, often we are overcome. And though we behold a wild beast, we are subdued. But seeing the Lord, art thou not subdued? And wherein are these things worthy of defence? For if it were this only, were it not sufficient for a recompense? I speak not of hearing such a voice, in the presence of the world, from him that sitteth on the Father's throne, and of obtaining the kingdom. But were not the very doing it sufficient for a reward? But now even in the presence of the world, and at the appearing of that unspeakable glory, he proclaims and crowns thee, and acknowledges thee as his sustainer and host, and is not ashamed of saying such things, that he may make the crown brighter for thee. So for this cause, while the one are punished justly, the others are crowned by grace. For though they had done 10,000 things, the munificence were of grace, that in return for services so small and cheap, such a heaven, and a kingdom, and so great honour should be given them. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. In good season again doth he speak of the Passion, when he had reminded them of the kingdom, and of the recompense there, and of the deathless punishment, as though he had said, Why are ye afraid at the dangers that are for a season, when such good things await you? But mark thou, I pray thee, how he hath in all his first sayings after a new manner worked up and thrown into the shade what was most painful to them. For he said not, Ye know that after 2 days I am betrayed, but, Ye know that after 2 days is the Passover, to show that what is done is a mystery, and that a feast and celebration is being kept for the salvation of the world, and that with foreknowledge he suffered all. So then, as though this were sufficient consolation for them, he did not even say anything to them now about a resurrection, for it was superfluous, and having discoursed so much about it, to speak of it again. And moreover, as I said, he shows that even his very passion is a deliverance from countless evils, having by the Passover reminded them of the ancient benefits in Egypt. Then were assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people in the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety, and kill him. But they said, Not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Seest thou the unspeakable corruption of the Jewish state? Attempting unlawful acts, they come to the high priest, desiring to obtain their authority from that quarter, whence they ought to have found hindrance. And how many high priests were there? For the law wills there should be one, but then there were many. Whence it is manifest that the Jewish constitution had begun to dissolve. For Moses, as I said, commanded there should be one, and that when he was dead there should be another, and by the life of this person he measured the banishment of them that had involuntarily committed manslaughter. How then were there at that time many high priests? They were afterwards made for a year. And this the Evangelist declared, when he was speaking of Zacharias, saying that he was of the course of Abiah. Those therefore doth he here call high priest, who had been high priest. What did they consult together? That they might seize him secretly, or that they might put him to death? Both, for they feared the people. Wherefore also they waited for the feast to be past, for they said, Not on the feast day. For the devil, lest he should make the Passion conspicuous, was not willing it should take place at the Passover, but they, lest there should be an uproar. Mark them then ever fearing, not the ills from God, neither lest any greater pollution should arise to them from the season, but in every case the ills from men. Yet for all this, boiling with anger, they changed their purpose again. For though they had said, Not at the feast time, when they found the traitor, they waited not for the time, but slew him at the feast. But why did they take him then? They were boiling with rage, as I said, and they expected then to find him, and all things they did as blinded. For though he himself made the greatest use of their wickedness for his own dispensation, they were not surely for this guiltless, but deserving of inflictions without number for their temper of mind. At least, when all should be set free, even the guilty, then these men slew the guiltless, him that had conferred on them countless benefits, and who for a time had neglected the Gentiles for their sake. But, O loving kindness! Them that were thus depraved, them that were thus froward and full of countless evils, He again saves, and sends the Apostles to be slain in their behalf, and by the Apostles makes entreaty, for we are ambassadors for Christ. Having then such patterns as these, I say not, let us die for our enemies, for we ought to do even this. But since we are too feeble for this, I say for the present, at least let us not look with an evil eye upon our friends. Let us not envy our benefactors. I say not for the present, let us do good to them that evil entreat us, for I desire even this. But since you are too gross for this, at least avenge not yourselves. What is our condition? A scene, an acting. Wherefore can it be that ye set yourselves directly against the acts enjoined? It is not for naught that all else hath been written, and how many things He did at the very cross sufficient to recall them to Him. But that thou mightest imitate His goodness, that thou mightest emulate His loving kindness. For indeed He cast them to the ground, and restored the servant's ear, and discoursed with forbearance. And great miracles did He show forth when lifted up, turning aside the sunbeams, bursting the rocks, raising the dead, frightening by dreams the wife of him that was judging Him, at the very judgment showing forth all meekness, which was of power not less than miracles to gain them over, forewarning them of countless things in the judgment hall, on the very cross crying aloud, Father, forgive them their sin. And when buried, how many things did He show forth for their salvation? And having risen again, did He not straightway call the Jews? Did He not give them remission of sins? Did He not set before them countless blessings? What can be more strange than this? They that crucified Him and were breathing murder, after they crucified Him, became sons of God. What can be equal to this tenderness? On hearing these things let us hide our faces, to think that we are so far removed from Him whom we are commanded to imitate. Let us at least see how great the distance, that we may at any rate condemn ourselves, for warring with these, in behalf of whom Christ gave His life, and not being willing to be reconciled to them, whom that He might reconcile, He refused not even to be slain. Unless this too be some expense, an outlay of money, which ye object in almsgiving. Consider of how many things thou art guilty, and so far from being backward to forgive them that have injured thee, thou wilt even run unto them that have grieved thee, in order that thou mayest have a ground for pardon, that thou mightest find a remedy for thine own evil deeds. The sons of the Greeks, who look for nothing great, have often shown self-command towards these. And thou who art to depart hence with such hopes, shrinkest, and art slow to act. And that which time effects, this thou endurest not to do before the time for God's law, but willest this passion to be quenched without reward, rather than for a reward, for neither if this should have arisen from the time, wilt thou have any advantage, but rather great will be the punishment, because what time hath effected, this the law of God persuaded thee not to do. But if thou sayest that thou burnest with the memory of the insult, call to mind if any good hath been done thee by him that hath offended thee, and how many ills thou hast occasioned to others. Hath he spoken ill of thee, and disgraced thee? Consider also that thou hast spoken thus of others. How then wilt thou obtain pardon, which thou bestowest not on others? But hast thou spoken ill of no one? But thou hast heard men so speaking, and allowed it. Neither is this guiltless. Wilt thou learn how good a thing it is not to remember injuries, and how this more than anything pleases God? Them that exult over persons, justly chastised by Himself, He punishes. And yet they are justly chastised, but thou shouldest not rejoice over them. So the prophet having brought many accusations, added this also, saying, They felt nothing for the affliction of Joseph. And again, She that inhabiteth Anan came not forth to lament for the place near her. And yet both Joseph, that is, the tribes that were sprung from him, and the neighbours of these others were punished according to the purpose of God. Nevertheless, it is His will that we sympathize even with these. For if we, being evil, when we are punishing a servant, if we should see one of his fellow slaves laughing, we at the same time are provoked the more, and turn our anger against him. Much more will God punish them that exult over those whom He chastises. But if upon them that are chastised by God it is not right to trample, but to grieve with them, much more with them that have sinned against us. For this is love's sign. Love God prefers to all things. For as in the royal purple, those are precious amongst the flowers and dyes, which make up this robing, so here too these virtues are the precious ones, which preserve love. But nothing maintains love so much as the not remembering them that have sinned against us. Why? Did not God guard the other side also? Why? Did He not drive him that hath done the wrong to him that is wronged? Doth He not send him from the altar to the other, and so after the reconciliation invite him to the table? But do not therefore wait for the other to come, since thus thou hast lost all. For to this intent, most especially, doth He appoint unto thee an unspeakable reward, that thou mayest prevent the other, since if thou art reconciled by his entreaties, the amity is no longer the result of the divine command, but of the other party's diligence. Wherefore also thou goest away uncrowned, while he receives the rewards. What sayest thou? Hast thou an enemy, and art thou not ashamed? Why is not the devil enough for us, that we bring upon ourselves those of our own race also? Would that not even he had been minded to war against us! Would that not even he were a devil! Knowest thou not how great the pleasure after reconciliation? For what, though in our enmity it appear not great? For that it is sweeter to love him that hath done us wrong than to hate him, after the enmity is done away, thou shalt be able to learn full well. Why then do we imitate the mad, devouring one another, warring against our own flesh? Hear even under the Old Testament how great regard there was for this. The ways of revengeful men are unto death. One man keepeth anger against another, and doth he seek healing of God? And yet he allowed, eye for eye, and tooth for tooth, how then doth he find fault? Because he allowed even those things, not that we should do them one to another, but that through the fear of suffering we might abstain from the commission of crime. And besides, those acts are the fruits of a short-lived anger. But to remember injuries is the part of a soul that practises itself in evil. But hast thou suffered evil? Yet nothing so great as thou wilt do to thyself by remembering injuries. And besides, it is not so much as possible for a good man to suffer any evil. For suppose there to be any man, having both children and a wife, and let him practice virtue, and let him have moreover many occasions of being injured, as well as abundance of possessions, as sovereign power, and many friends, and let him enjoy honour, only let him practice virtue, for this must be added, and let us in supposition lay plagues upon him. And let some wicked man come unto him, and involve him in losses. What then is that to him who accounts money nothing? Let him kill his children. What is this to him who learns to be wise touching the resurrection? Let him slay his wife. What is this to him who is instructed not to sorrow for them that are fallen asleep? Let him cast him into dishonour. What this to him who accounts the things present the flowers of the grass. If thou wilt, let him also torture his body, and cast him into prison. What this to him that hath learnt? Though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed. And that tribulation worketh approval. Now I had undertaken that he should receive no harm, but the account as it proceeded hath shown that he is even advantaged, being renewed, and becoming approved. Let us not then vex ourselves with others, injuring ourselves, and rendering our soul weak. For the vexation is not so much from our neighbour's wickedness, as from our weakness. Because of this, should any one insult us, we weep and frown. Should any one rob us, we suffer the same like those little children, which the more clever of their companions provoke for nothing, grieving them for small causes. But nevertheless these two, if they should see them vexed, continue to tease them, but if laughing, they on the contrary leave off. But we are more foolish even than these, lamenting for these things, about which we ought to laugh. Wherefore I entreat, let us let go this childish mind, and lay hold of heaven. For indeed, Christ willeth us to be men, perfect men. On this wise did Paul also command, Brethren, be not children in understanding. He saith, Howbeit in malice be ye children. Let us therefore be children in malice, and flee wickedness, and lay hold on virtue, that we may attain also to the good things eternal, by the grace and love towards men of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might, world without end. Amen. End of Homily 78.